My name's Rob, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Rob.
I've been in treatment like 9 times. I definitely did not get this right away, and it's taken a lot of pain and suffering to get to where I am today. I'm just going to kind of dive right in because, my journey, I want to spend a lot of time on like what happened like while I was trying to get sober, because I have such a history of like doing the wrong thing. So I have a lot of light to shine on that if you're interested. So, but I always like to start off saying, when I first came into the rooms, I saw the steps on the wall, and I was 18 years old. It was court ordered, and I saw step 1, and it said, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. And like at first glance, I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like I could easily see the powerlessness part because I was completely incapable of like putting anything down. And then as a result of that, I could easily see the unmanageability, just to rattle off some of the severe consequences I've had. I've been to 2 psychiatric hospitals, 9 rehabs. I've been to jail twice. I've been homeless. I've been arrested for DWI 4 times. I've destroyed countless relationships. I've been jumped. I've been stabbed. I've been through the ringer, and none of that was even close for me to be like, maybe I should try to stop. So the materialistic stuff, the physical consequences, that didn't really slow me down in the slightest. I was one of those people that started relatively young, and the consequences started happening in my life relatively early. I was still a minor when I was like started to get arrested and stuff like that. So the consequences were ever present in my life, and so it was relatively normal. Like when I would total a car and end up in jail, it wasn't like, oh my God, I need help, I need to stop drinking. It was just like, that was crazy. It was just another Tuesday. So anyway, that unmanageability, I could see that unmanageability as a direct result of my drinking and my drugging. But over time, as I did some work in AA, I started to see it a little bit differently. And what it appears to me today is my life is unmanageable. Therefore, I am powerless over alcohol, right? My life has always been unmanageable. And I can track that back to when I was a little kid, before I ever took the first drink, setting the whole crazy cycle in motion, And when I say my life was unmanageable, what I really mean by that is like my emotional state was completely unmanageable. I could not control my emotions. I was completely a slave to them. So if I was having a bad day, everybody was going to know about it. From a young age, I was going to have a temper tantrum. I was going to get in trouble. I was constantly being singled out by authority figures in my life from a very young age, which definitely didn't help for my criminal record down the line. But and I also mean my thinking was unmanageable. My thoughts had complete power over me. I couldn't separate the emotional reaction to these thoughts, and it was very rarely would I have that second thought. It was just like, here's the irrational thought, here's the irrational action, and then I don't think about anything else until in hindsight, and I'm like, sitting in a jail cell or court-ordered rehab or something like that, and then I'm like, oh wow, I probably shouldn't have done that. So anyway, I started drinking and drugging probably around 15 years old, and like I said, it progressed very quickly. I did a lot of drugs. I've overdosed a lot of times. That's another consequence I've had. But what really broke me in the long run, like when I first asked for help, was the crushing weight of my loneliness. I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but I remember saying things to myself like, I'm only hurting myself. I'm not hurting anybody else. If they would just leave me alone and let me do what I want to do, everything would be fine, right? And now today I can see like that's not true. If I'm hurting myself, I'm hurting other people. But it goes way beyond that. I was hurting other people too. I just didn't want to think about it, But with that realization, oh boy, where am I going with this? Yeah, so the loneliness, yep. That was what really broke me. And so the fateful day came where he finally did leave me alone and let me do what I wanted to do. And it was the worst thing that I had ever experienced. At the end of at the end of that run, there was nobody left in my life that wanted anything to really do with me. It was just like that dog eat dog kind of crew, The people that cared about me in the beginning kind of just cut me out of their life because they didn't want to see me kill myself. And then like my parents and like the close family members, the ones that wouldn't give up on me, I cut them out of my life because they were getting in my way of the next one. And so that can't happen. That takes precedence over everything else. And so I kind of ended up all alone. And so I finally cracked under the pressure of it all, and I asked for help for the first time. I was like 25 years old at the time. And I had tried to call this treatment center that was like 30 minutes from where I lived. I'm from New Jersey originally. And I had no idea how rehab worked. So I literally like Googled this rehab and like called that place. And they're like, no, you got to go to admissions. And next thing you know, they convinced me to get on a plane and come to Florida. And I ended up on the west coast of Florida and then came here after I got out. And so that period of time, like, I kind of just thought to be sober was to be miserable, because every time I attempted to get sober, I just got so miserable that I was just like, this isn't worth it, and would always go back to the drinking and the drugging. But something interesting happened. When I was at that first treatment center, I was very ill, coming off of a lot of stuff. And of course I was miserable for like the first 3 weeks, but then I started to like physically feel a little bit better. And I was like hanging out at the smoke pit, and I was belly laughing. I was just like bullshitting with some of my peers, and like I was laughing so hard. I can't tell you what we were talking about, but I had this like weird moment where I like stopped and I looked around and I realized like, oh my God, I'm in rehab right now. I was having so much fun that I forgot where I was for a minute. And that really kind of hit me hard because it like opened my eyes to like, wow, maybe you can have fun even if you're sober. And that was like news to me at the time because I had never even considered the thought possible. So I got convinced from the staff at the rehab and also some of my peers to like stick with treatment and go to the next level of care. So I ended up in West Palm, and I went into a halfway house and did an IOP program and stuff. But I didn't really understand how this all works, and so my interest had nothing to do with recovery, and I was like 100% about like, hey, I'm gonna go to the beach and chase girls around because that's fun. And that's exactly what I did. That was my focus. And, I had fun for a little bit. And I was in a new area with new people, and I had drug tests hanging over my head and stuff. So it kept me sober for a few months, But eventually the novelty of it all wears off. It stops feeling like a big vacation, and it starts to feel like life again, And before you know it, I started to have that feeling again. And then I was off to the races and down here now. And, that there was a string of overdoses, and it just got really bad until eventually I ended up in a detox down in Fort Lauderdale. I met a girl in the detox and started hooking up with her in the detox, and then we get out and I pack my bags, sneak out of a halfway house, and next thing you know, we're running across the country together. Now, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. And I thought it was a great idea at the time. And something you need to understand is I had just gotten out of treatment, so I hadn't even relapsed yet. I was sober when I made this decision, and it just kind of goes to show, at least me, that I am perfectly capable of ruining my life completely sober, right? Because my thinking is really messed up, and unless I want to use the program the way it's supposed to be to take a hard look at that thinking, I'm just going to keep repeating the same stuff over and over again. But I wasn't ready yet. But I ran away with this girl. I ended up in Colorado, and I almost died. Like, it was really bad. She bailed on me out there. I was stuck for a while. I didn't know anybody, and I was back on drugs. It was, I was like this close to being stuck out there permanently homeless, and I managed to get in touch with somebody I had met down here who was like, he had halfway houses, and he was a part owner of an IOP and stuff, and he told me, listen, if you can get back here to Florida, I have a bed waiting for you, and I'll even give you a job. And I was like, okay. It took me a little bit to get stuff together and make it back here, and I didn't have insurance. I didn't have a way to get any kind of detox meds, so I just copped as much drugs as I could possibly get my hands on, and she left her car behind. She flew back. I didn't even have a license, but I'm driving across country without a license, with the frickin' breathalyzer connected to the ignition, so like every hour or so on the interstate, I got a freaking blow. It's a pain in the ass. But I detoxed cold turkey in that car on my way back to Florida on the interstate. Like, I would pull over in the rest areas and just sweat it out, and I'll spare you the more gruesome details, but you could imagine how horrible it was. So I make it back to Florida, and I'm pretty broken at this point. But my motives are still messed up. My motive is, okay, I need to get like 90 days. That's what I wanted. I wanted 90 days. I didn't want like anything else. I was just like, I just want to get like 90 days to get my money back up so that I can make some moves. That was kind of the logic. But I had been beaten so severely from this run that the one amazing thing that had came out of it was I was fully aware that I couldn't get 90 days. I was like, that is not fucking possible. So I was like, maybe if I do take some of the suggestions that they've been telling me for a long time now, maybe I can get 90 days, and then I'll be out, So I ended up asking somebody to sponsor me. I got to the halfway house, by the way, with like 3 days off of heroin and like 1 day off of alcohol, like just enough to be able to pass a drug test to get my foot in the door. So I was still kind of sick, But I asked the sponsor to sponsor me at like 2 days sober, and we started getting into the work. And I ended up staying sober for 2 years. So there's like two significant things that happened in that 2 years. And one was I had what I like to call my step 2 moment, right? And I had been doing the step work, and I think I had just done a third step, but I don't know if I had fully absorbed it or anything, but I was going through the motions at least. And then one day I come home, and I'm at the halfway house that I'm living at, and nobody's home. And there's like 16 guys that live in this house, and I'm home alone. Weird that it even happened, And I'm sitting there alone, and I just got to thinking, it was not a good place to be. And so I think my way into this dark hole, and I feel that weight on my chest pressing down on me like I'm suffocating, and the only thing that I can think of that'll make me feel better is drugs and alcohol, and it's like the obsession, the mental obsession they talk about. It blots everything out. You get the tunnel vision, and that's the only, I like to compare it to like, it's like you're suffocating, and that breath of fresh air that you so desperately need is in the bottom of the bottle or in the bottom of the bag, And so you pursue that like you're dying, desperate. And in the heat of that moment, I remember thinking to myself, because I had actually cracked open a big book for once in my life and read a little bit, so I kind of knew, not that I knew anything, but I at least had this stuff rattling around in my head. And I remember thinking to myself while I was feeling like that, I go, see, this is it right here. This feeling that I'm experiencing right now, this is why this shit doesn't work for me. If anybody else felt the way that I feel right now, this wouldn't work for them either. And then I just something just slipped in my mind. It just dawned on me, and I had this epiphany, right? The step 2 says we. We came to believe that a power greater than us could restore us to sanity. And I realized in that moment, oh my God, this feeling that I'm experiencing right now is what the book is actually talking about. I never made the connection, I'm like, this isn't what makes me unique. This isn't what makes me, different from everybody else where this won't work. This is what makes me an alcoholic. This is what makes me one of them. And it was just like, boom, it was kind of like the floodgates opened up a little bit. And as a result of that epiphany, the obsession disappeared. And now that was uncharted territory for me, because when I got to that mind state, it was already past the point of no return, like I was going to get high. So the fact that I got past it was like a miracle in my mind. And then, so I had one other significant moment. I was writing a fourth step, and it was long. It was like 30 pages long, and I'm like flipping back through because I was an angry guy, I guess. I had a lot of names that people I was angry with. And I get to the first page of the notebook where I started the fourth step, and on the back side of the front cover was the name Brian Moore written down. I had no idea that I had this guy's notebook, but he was my roommate in treatment. And he had a really bad attitude, you know. We all knew he was going to get high when he left, and he did. And within, I want to say, 2 months, his wife found him dead on the side of the road. So he had overdosed in a car, and whoever he was with just kind of kicked him out on the side of the road and left. Guy had kids and everything. And it hit me hard, the fact that I was writing my fourth step in his notebook, you know? And I realized I was using his notebook to stay sober that day. And this is kind of like, in Bill's story, he has the white light experience, right? This is kind of like the white light experience in my life. I realized for the first time that although I was making an effort to be sober, it was purely for selfish reasons, right? I wanted to have a better life. I was tired of being miserable. I wanted to be happy. I didn't want to die. Me, I. And for the first time, I realized that this is so much bigger than me. Because maybe, just maybe, if I could stay sober, a result of that could be maybe I could help somebody else get sober, and maybe that wife doesn't have to find her husband dead on the side of the road. Maybe 2 children don't have to grow up without a father, you know, and maybe that person who gets sober, they can help, and it just perpetuates itself. And so it was just, you know, a new world snapped into view, right? I saw the world in its beauty and its perfection for a fleeting moment, but it's fleeting, right? And so, you know, eventually things go back. I mean, I was thriving on that energy for a while, but eventually things go back to normal and stuff starts to, you know, get on your nerves again. Next thing you know, you want to choke your boss and you don't get paid enough, and she's lying, cheating, you know, whatever. And, you know, so I had to continue down the path. And I did, and I started sponsoring people, and life got great. I moved back home to New Jersey. I got plugged into AA up there. I picked up a couple of sponsees. I did not get a sponsor, right? Because I had what they call a spiritual ego. Right? I thought I knew better. I thought that my connection with God was so good that, you know, I didn't need somebody else to guide me. And I made some terrible decisions that were like ticking time bombs in my life. And about 8 months later, it blew up, you know, and I picked up a drink. I want to say it was like one day before my 2-year anniversary, I decided to have a drink. And, you know, I had seen a couple people that I had gotten sober with in the halfway get a couple years sober and then go out and start drinking because they were there for drugs, you know? And like on social media, it looked all shiny and fancy, like they were living a good life and it wasn't screwing them up. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I could do that, you know, one day. And I tried that experiment, and that experiment cost me another 14 months of my life, the worst 14 months of my life. In that time period, I did more damage collectively in that 14-month period than I had done in my previous decade of using. And at the end of that run, my best friend, who I used to use with when we were younger, and then we had both gotten sober at one point. He was just under a year. I think he had a little over 9 months, and I had relapsed and I was running, and he wanted me to be sober more than I wanted to be sober. You know, he would bring me to treatment centers, pick me up from treatment centers, set up intakes at IOP for me. Like this is just a friend, you know. It's not like my mom, you know. And so he was really going the extra mile, and he was going through a tough period himself. He was going through a divorce, a custody battle, all really stressful things, and COVID hit, and everything shut down. And and especially in New Jersey, I mean, it was down, and it was for a long time. And you know, once the meetings were gone, a lot of people that were solid, a lot of people that had some time started to go back out, and he started to want to go back out, and he would ask me, come on, give me some. And I said, no. And then he called me one day when I was really desperate, fiending. I didn't have money, I didn't have drugs, I was going to get sick. And he said, if you give me some, I'll get you high. And so I did what I had to do, and sure enough, I got him high before he got me sober. And as a result of that, he died 2 weeks later, you know? And so at this point, I had conceded to my innermost self that I would be better off dead. I was no longer drinking and drugging for oblivion. I was drinking and drugging to die. I was resigned to a slow death by alcohol and drugs, and I thought I deserved every second of it. And I had given up on life. And it's crazy because, you know, even though I gave up, like, just a twist of fate, you know, like somebody who I had met down here, like, reached out to me out of the blue. Didn't even know I had been getting high for 14 months. He had no idea I relapsed. He thought I was, you know, living my best life. And, you know, as soon as he hears the state that I'm in, he's just like, get to Florida, get a plane ticket, I'll scholarship you, like, it's all taken care of. And I was like, all right. I was able to get into a detox, and then I flew back down here, and he scholarshiped me through. I tried calling my old sponsor who brought me through the steps the first time when I was down here. We met up, and he pawned me off on his best friend. He had just had a baby, so he didn't have the time for my needy ass. But I get down here, and I go through the steps again. And I don't have that white light experience this time, but a lot of amazing stuff started to happen. And I talked about my friend who died with my sponsor during my 5th step, and he said to me, he was like, you know, one day you're gonna share your story, and his story is a part of yours now, and maybe you can help somebody with his story too, you know. And that helped kind of diminish some of that, like, survivor's guilt, you know. And you know, so I go through the steps, and I get down to you know, steps 8 and 9. And, like, his family is, like, on there, and, you know, I'm thinking to myself, like, there's no way that I could ever, how could I ever, like, talk to his family and like, make an amends for something like that? I feel like it wouldn't do any justice, you know? And then it was, like, 2 Thanksgivings ago, I think, right? 2 Thanksgivings ago, my phone rings, and it's his sister. And so I freeze, you know, I'm like, oh shit, what the fuck is this about, you know? And I answer the phone, and she's, you know, basically says, like, hey, I really need you to answer some questions. And I didn't know what to say or what to do, and so the principles of the steps just guided me in this moment. And I was just like, I have to be honest. That's the only thing what other move do I have here? You know, feed her a line of bullshit? Like, that's even more messed up, you know? And so I just was honest with her, told her everything that I knew, and the craziest thing happened. He had been obsessing over this, you know, and he had done a lot of investigating, and he had pieced together this whole puzzle, and he basically had this story of, like, what had happened and what brought him out and how he died and everything. But there was just this one missing piece of the puzzle that just they could not find, that, you know, they just couldn't put it to rest. And I had been selfishly holding on to that piece of the puzzle the whole time, just out of fear, you know? And when I gave him the truth, he finally had that missing piece of the puzzle. He finally understood how everything had happened, and they were able to have some closure. And today, his sister still calls me, checks in on me, making sure I'm still sober, making sure I'm still doing the right thing. She's like one of my biggest supporters, you know? So it's like, it's pretty amazing, you know, and that's by no, you know, I had nothing to do with that. Like, I just, like, kind of reacted the right way a little bit, but, like, to me, that's a higher power working in my life. Like, he, you know, I would have never had the courage, I don't think, to pick up the phone and make that call, or, like, go and visit them, you know. And so I stayed sober for, I want to say, about a year and a half, and eventually I had another slip. Like I said, the mind state that we get as a result of working these steps is fleeting, and unless you have maintenance, you will lose that mind state and slowly but surely revert back into the old mind state, you know. And so, you know, after making a lot of progress, you know, like finally getting out of halfway and getting my own place for, like, you know, getting some utility bills in my name, for God's sake, you know, getting line of credit, things just like normal, like 30-year-old men have, you know. I finally started making all this progress, you know, and it was great, but it was scary. It scared the shit out of me, you know, like having nothing is my comfort zone, right? Because if I fuck up and burn my life down, then I don't really have much to lose. And then all of a sudden, I stay sober for a while and I start building this life and it gets better and better and better. Now all of a sudden I've got all this stuff to lose, and it's just like financial insecurity like takes over, and I'm so fearful that I'm gonna screw everything up and lose it. And very quickly, if I'm not doing the maintenance, if I'm not living in steps 10, 11, and 12, right? Very quickly, the presence of a higher power is blotted out, and I can no longer see or feel God working in my life. And when that happens, I take the reins back and I'm like, all right, how can I fix this? You know what I mean? Like, I'm afraid that I might not be able to pay my rent, so let me work 80 hours a week. You know, like, that's how I try to fix things. Like, I try to take control rather than just having faith and being like, you know what, God will provide for me, everything will work out, which it always does. It always does. You know, I try to take control and you know. So anyway, one thing I've been thinking about is, you know, it's easy to talk about what it was like and what happened, but sometimes I find it very hard to put into words what it's like now, right? And so I've been kind of putting some conscious effort into thinking about this, and you know, it's not like, oh, I went through the steps and then I lived happily ever after. You know, that's not real. Life still shows up, and sometimes bad stuff happens, and we're in pain. You know, sometimes we suffer, and you know, I used to think that I could use AA as a way to avoid suffering. You know, like I would never have to feel pain again. I was basically trying to use 12 steps in AA like I was using alcohol and drugs. And that doesn't really work. You can try, but you'll burn yourself out and end up doing more damage in the long run. So what I really have found is my life has purpose today. My life has taken on a new meaning, and that meaning is so powerful that it makes all the attendant suffering of life worth it. And that's why I'm sober today, because it's worth it. You know, my life is worth it, I'm worth it, and it took me almost 15 years to get to that place, you know, and I've come so close to dying, and I've suffered so much to finally realize that, you know. And the last thing I'll say is this: when I first came around, I used to see people speaking at meetings, chairing meetings, and doing all this service work, and I remember like looking at them from the back of the room and being like, those guys really seem like they're happy. You know, I wish I could be like that. But the mind state was, I wish I could be like that, but I definitely can't. I could never do that. I couldn't be a sponsor. I couldn't speak at a meeting. I'm not qualified to do that. And one of the best things I learned since in my recovery journey is God doesn't call upon the qualified. He qualifies the called. And so if you're sitting here and you're alive and you're not dead, like countless alcoholics and addicts that never make it into these rooms, I can tell you right now you're being called, right? And part of that qualification is the suffering, right? I've heard people say the hardest step is the doorstep. Nothing the 12 steps will ask you to do is anywhere near as hard as what you had to suffer and endure to make it to a point where you were finally willing to come into a place like this, you know? And now the other part of that qualifications is the 12 steps. And so it's up to you guys, you know, to just get with the sponsor and get through the steps, and then turn around and help the next sorry person that comes walking through the door. It worked for me, and I imagine that it would work for any of you. So with that, thanks for letting me share.